Tests have confirmed that human remains found last year are those of the last Tsar's two missing children. It proves that all of Nicholas II's immediate family...
For more than a century, one mystery has haunted history. A royal family, erased in a single night. A brutal execution, with no survivors, or so the world was told. But deep beneath layers of secrecy, missing evidence, and carefully controlled narratives, a question refused to die. Did the truth about the Romanovs ever fully come out? Now, decades later, new DNA testing methods, far more advanced than anything used before, have reopened the case. And what they revealed wasn't just confirmation of a tragic end, it exposed a secret so dangerous, the Russian monarchy had every reason to bury it forever. Subscribe and stay curious. What really happened during one of history's most tragic events? Let's find out. The Romanovs' mysterious disappearance. The story of the Romanov family's disappearance was one of the most mysterious tragedies of the 20th century. The Romanovs had ruled Russia for more than 300 years. They had power, wealth, and position. Then they lost everything. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, the last Tsar, Nicholas II, gave up his throne. He left his role as ruler and agreed to let a new government take over. That change was meant to bring peace and reform. Instead, it brought more chaos and conflict. What happened to the family next became a mystery that lasted for decades. After Nicholas II's abdication, the former emperor and his family were moved from place to place. They first stayed under house arrest in a palace near what is now St. Petersburg. The provisional government that replaced Nicholas wanted to keep the family safe from political enemies. But that government soon lost power to a more radical group known as the Bolsheviks. The Bolsheviks were determined to reshape Russia completely and eliminate any danger of a return to royal rule. As the civil war grew, the Romanovs were moved again, this time to Tobolsk in Siberia. There the family lived in isolation, watched by guards and cut off from the world they once led. In April 1918, the family was again moved, this time to a house in the industrial city of Yekaterinburg, high in the Ural Mountains. The Bolsheviks had renamed the place the Ipatiev House and turned it into a prison. The former Tsar, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children lived there with a few loyal servants. Life for the Romanovs had changed totally. They could no longer walk freely, speak openly, or plan for their future. The world outside was in turmoil, and the family was trapped inside. They had no contact with friends or allies who might help them. By the middle of 1918, the situation outside was even more dangerous. Forces opposing the Bolsheviks were moving closer to Yekaterinburg. The Bolsheviks feared that these forces might try to free the Romanovs and use them as a symbol to rally others against the new government. To prevent this possibility, the local Soviet authorities, leaders of the Bolshevik government in the region, decided that the Romanovs must be eliminated. Some historians believe that the order came from the highest levels of the Bolshevik leadership. Others say it was mainly the local commanders who made the decision. The exact origin of the order remained a subject of debate for many years because no one in a position of power spoke openly about it at the time. On the night of July 16th to 17th, 1918, at the Ipatiev House, the Romanov family was taken to a basement room under the pretext that they needed to be moved for their safety. Instead, a group of Bolshevik guards and officers stood ready. The family was ordered to stand in a line, and without warning, the guards opened fire. The gunfire was intense and chaotic. Some family members passed away quickly from gunshots. Others were still alive when the bullets stopped. The guards turned to other weapons, stabbing those who remained breathing. The violence was complete and brutal. The Romanovs and several of their loyal servants lost their lives that night. After the massacre, those responsible tried to hide what had happened. They loaded the bodies onto a truck and took them to a forest outside the city. There, in what became known as Koptiaki Forest, the remains were buried in unmarked graves. Later, the bodies were mutilated, burned, and covered even more to make it harder for anyone to find or identify them. The Bolshevik leaders and the Soviet government did not want the truth to spread. They feared that revealing the full story would spark protest or sympathy for the Romanovs. Because of this intentional effort to hide the burial sites and the brutal details, accurate information was unavailable for many years. For decades after the execution, the Soviet government publicly denied what had happened to the Romanov family. They released only limited or misleading details. Rumors circulated across Europe and beyond. Many people could not believe that all members of the royal family had been killed. Stories grew that at least one child might have survived, especially the youngest daughter. These rumors were strong because there was no proof to disprove them. The lack of evidence left room for imagination. Some held on to hope that the Romanovs were still alive in secret. Others thought the bodies had been hidden so well they would never be found. During this long period of uncertainty, many stories and legends appeared. Some involved impostors claiming to be surviving Romanov children. These claims drew public attention because of the mystery around the family's fate. Without official proof of death or burial, people doubted official accounts. Some believed secret rescues had succeeded. Others thought the Bolsheviks might have hidden survivors for political purposes. The world watched and waited, but the truth remained buried with the bodies. It wasn't until Soviet control loosened in the late 1980s and early 1990s that the story started to become clearer. In 1979, a gravesite was discovered near Yekaterinburg, but it was not publicly revealed until after the Soviet regime fell. In 1991, the remains from that site were exhumed and identified. Yet the full truth did not come out until many years later, when more remains were found and advanced DNA analysis became possible, the discovery of the mass grave. In 1991, an extraordinary discovery was made in a forest near Yekaterinburg, Russia. For decades, historians and scientists had searched for the burial site of Russia's last imperial family. The location had been a closely guarded secret for many years, known only to a few people inside the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapsed, more information became accessible. A geologist and others who had long heard rumors of a grave began investigating the area. They found a shallow burial site containing human bones. Russian authorities took control of the site and launched an official excavation. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a large number of skeletal remains. This discovery marked the start of a new chapter in solving the greatest mystery of the Romanov family's fate. Meanwhile, the burial site, sometimes called the mass grave, contained the remains of 9 individuals. The bones were buried together in a rough, unmarked pit near a former mining area. There were no markers or signs to indicate whose remains they were. Scientists and investigators believed the remains could belong to the Romanov family and their close servants, but scientific proof was needed. The bones were carefully collected and labeled for further study. This was challenging because the remains were old, fragile, and many were incomplete after decades underground. To confirm their identities, scientists required techniques that could withstand the effects of time. Traditional methods of identifying remains were not precise enough. The bones were too damaged for confident identification based only on physical traits. However, modern DNA analysis offered a solution. DNA is a molecule in every cell carrying a person's unique genetic code. Though DNA degrades over time, Scientists had developed methods to extract and analyze it from old bones. These techniques allowed them to compare the DNA from the remains with DNA from known living relatives. This was the key to proving whether the bones belonged to members of the Romanov family. The first step in DNA analysis was to categorize the remains. Scientists used a method called short tandem repeat analysis, or STR. This test examines specific parts of DNA that differ between individuals. STR testing allowed researchers to determine how the skeletons were related. The results showed that among the 9 sets of remains, 2 were adults, 1 male and 1 female, and 3 were children, all female. The patterns of relatedness suggested that a family was among the bones. Nuclear DNA results indicated that the adults were likely the parents of the children, and the children were related to each other. The other 4 skeletons were not closely related to this family group, supporting the idea that they might be servants or staff who had been with the Romanovs at the time. The second major type of DNA used was mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA. This form of DNA is inherited only from a person's mother and can trace maternal ancestry across generations. Scientists took mitochondrial DNA samples from the remains believed to be the Tsarina and her daughters. They then compared these samples with mtDNA from living relatives who shared the same maternal line. For Tsarina Alexandra and her children, they compared the mitochondrial DNA to that of living members of the British royal family, whose historical records showed shared common maternal ancestors. The results were conclusive. The mtDNA from the remains matched the mtDNA of living maternal relatives. This match provided strong evidence that the female remains were indeed those of the Tsarina and her daughters. Identifying the male adult was more complicated because mtDNA cannot confirm a father's identity. Instead, scientists compared mtDNA from the remains believed to be Tsar Nicholas II with mtDNA from living relatives who shared a maternal link with the Tsar through his extended family. The results showed nearly identical sequences, confirming that the male adult in the grave was the last Tsar of Russia. This part of the testing used advanced methods to account for slight variations in DNA sequences, which naturally occur within a person's mtDNA. The combined results from STR and mtDNA tests provided a clear picture. The bones in the mass grave belonged to a family group that matched the historical Romanov family. The individuals included the last Tsar, Nicholas II, his wife Tsarina Alexandra, and 3 of their daughters. The other 4 individuals were not part of the family, but matched known servants and staff who were executed with them. Scientists worked carefully to ensure the matches were accurate and not the result of contamination or error. Unfortunately, it was not possible to identify the missing Tsarevich Alexei and 1 daughter in this initial excavation, leaving a small mystery at the time. Nevertheless, identifying the main family members using DNA was a scientific breakthrough, confirming what many historians had long believed but could not prove. The results of these DNA tests were announced publicly in 1993 by British and Russian scientists who had collaborated on the project. This was the first time modern genetic science was successfully used to identify century-old remains believed to belong to a famous royal family. The findings were accepted by many in the scientific community and marked a major step in understanding the tragic end of the Romanovs. By matching the remains to living relatives, scientists solved a mystery that had lasted over 70 years. Even after this breakthrough, questions remained. 2 children were missing from the original grave. Rumors and theories continued about where their remains were or whether they had survived. Scientists and archaeologists continued searching for additional evidence. Years later, another discovery and further testing would finally complete the picture of the Romanov family's burial, confirming that all family members had been executed and buried near Yekaterinburg. The search for the missing Romanov children. In the long quest to uncover what really happened to the Romanov family, scientists worked for many years to find every last piece of the puzzle. After the discovery of the mass grave in 1991, scientists confirmed that most of the Romanov family was in that burial site. That left 2 family members unaccounted for. The missing remains were those of the heir to the throne, Tsarevich Alexei, and one of his sisters, either Maria or Anastasia. Scientists worldwide knew that finding the missing bodies could solve the mystery completely. Interest in locating the missing Romanov children never faded. Historians and researchers studied old records, including notes from the chief executioner in 1918, who wrote about how the bodies were handled after the massacre. These notes described how 9 bodies had been buried in one grave, while Alexei and one of his sisters were burned and buried separately. This information guided later searches. Archaeologists and amateur history groups began looking for this separate burial site near Yekaterinburg. Over the years, multiple search teams tried to locate the remains. Some discovered small bone fragments, clothing pieces, and other clues hinting at a second burial site. Yet it was not until the summer of 2007 that a significant discovery was made. About 70 meters from the larger mass grave, archaeologists found human remains that had been badly burned and damaged. Their location matched descriptions in earlier historical notes and provided scientists with a new lead. The remains found in 2007 were examined carefully. They included parts of a skeleton of a young boy and parts of a skeleton of a young woman. These bones were fragile and charred, making identification challenging. Scientists used new tools and advanced DNA testing methods far stronger than those available in the early 1990s. These more powerful tools included 3 types of DNA testing. Mitochondrial DNA, or mtDNA, was used because it could be compared with DNA from known maternal relatives of the Romanovs. Autosomal short tandem repeat, or STR. Testing examined DNA patterns to show how individuals were related. YSTR testing looked at genetic information passed from father to son and was used to match male DNA lines. By combining all 3 methods, scientists had a powerful set of tools to identify bones more than 80 years old. Scientists conducted these tests very carefully. The first step was to compare the DNA from the young boy's remains with the DNA from the previously identified remains of Tsar Nicholas II and from known living relatives. Because YSTR is passed directly from father to son, it could confirm that the boy was biologically related to Nicholas II. The results showed a match, proving that the boy was indeed Tsarevich Alexei. This confirmation ended decades of speculation about whether the heir to the Russian throne had survived. Testing also showed that the young woman was genetically related to the Romanov family through the maternal line. Her mtDNA closely matched the mitochondrial DNA of the mother, Tsarina Alexandra, and DNA from living relatives. These results confirmed that the woman was one of the Tsar's daughters, either Maria or Anastasia. The genetic tests were so strong that scientists described the evidence as nearly irrefutable. The discovery of Alexei and one of his sisters was not a minor addition. It completed the final missing pieces about where every member of the Romanov family was buried. Once scientists confirmed the identities of the newly found remains, they could state with confidence that all 7 children had died in 1918. The complete DNA record showed that no members of the Romanov family had survived. Modern DNA confirmation finally made it clear that the Romanovs were all buried near Yekaterinburg. The scientific breakthroughs that led to identifying the missing bodies represented one of the most important uses of forensic genetics in historical investigation. Combining mitochondrial DNA, autosomal short tandem repeats, and YSTR testing allowed analysis of bones damaged by time, fire, and deliberate attempts to destroy evidence. The success of these tests showed that new scientific methods could solve long-standing mysteries about historical figures. Through careful laboratory work and international cooperation, scientists reconstructed relationships between individuals and connected remains with living relatives across generations. This was a major success for both science and history. The story of the Romanovs reached a new level of closure for historians and scientists. The evidence showed clearly that Tsarevich Alexei and one of his sisters had been buried in a separate grave near the main burial site. The findings did not just confirm their deaths, they completed the genetic record for the entire Romanov family. While questions remained about exactly which daughter was buried with Alexei, the fact that both children were accounted for ended the long mystery of the missing remains. Every member of the imperial family was now identified through DNA. The success of these genetic efforts changed how scientists and archaeologists approach other historical cases. This work demonstrated how science can provide certainty to questions that history alone could not answer.